Okay, Martin, I want you to take a seat in that chair and cover your right eye. I'm going to move my hand around and you just tell me when you can see it, okay? Just say, okay, I see it. Okay, I see it. And again. Okay, I see it. And again. Okay, I see it. All right, now let's cover your left eye and we're going to do the same thing. Okay, I see it. And again. I see it. And one more time. Okay, I see it. Well, your peripheral vision seems normal, but I want to try something. Dr. Holloway began to very loudly slide the exam table to the side of the room. He then removed a dreary old oil painting from the wall. It was a cloudy ocean view seen from the stern of an old wooden sailboat. The waves were huge but smooth with no white capping. In the upper left of the scene, the sky was very dark. The painting seemed to say, "All is well, but not for long." Over the past few weeks, I'd developed an appreciation for the painting. It wasn't an original, but very good detailed print that revealed every delicate brushstroke by a talented artist whose name was Simmons. On each of the past 3 visits to Dr. Holloway's clinic, I would make plans to look up the artist, but the moment I would leave, my thoughts of the painting would quickly fade away. The following visits, I would start all over again, appreciating it, wanting a copy of it, then forgetting about it the moment I left. I just wish I knew the title of it. I was almost saddened when he removed it. I was afraid that once removed, it might not return. Dr. Holloway could very well decide it was time to update his office's decor. And then, just like that, I'd never see it again. And it would come back to haunt me at 3 a.m. when I'd have trouble sleeping, or maybe it would get stuck in my head for a few weeks at a time, every morning as I brushed my teeth. Okay, we should really have a blank wall for this, but I think it'll do. Dr. Holloway sat heavily in his rolling chair and scooted backwards to his desk. He flicked on his examining light and rotated the cup upwards, illuminating the nearly blank white wall in front of me. All right, I want you to do the same thing, only I want you to focus on that single mounting hook, starting with the left eye. So cover your right eye. Tell me when you can see my hand. I knew what he was getting at. It was not going to work. I played along anyway. Okay, I see it. Okay, I see it. I see it. Now, did you see any spots or any other movement other than my hand during the part of the exam? No, not at all. Like I said, I only see it when I'm looking at people and sometimes animals. I'll tell you what. Let me just roll over here for a second. He carefully rolled under the lamp, ducking his head while doing so. He rolled over to the illuminated wall and backed his chair up until he was positioned directly in front of me and facing me. Now, I want you to just look at me and you tell me if you see anything. I'm just going to tell you what I think may be happening. The brain is a complicated organ. At any time it's damaged the way that yours has been, it can produce quite complicated symptoms. I mean, you received a very hard blow to the back of your head and pretty much damaged your occipital lobe. And such anomalies are very likely and in fact very common with this type of injury. That, along with the damage to your frontal lobe, you might be processing information incorrectly. Or maybe even just a millisecond or more slower. And this could explain the blurry sort of tracers when someone moves. See, if I move my head from side to side, do you see any, say, dark shadows around it? No, I get what you're saying, but they're not shadows at all. These are very defined objects that I'm seeing. But only out of the corners of my eyes. When I try to look directly at them, they disappear. Not exactly disappear, it's almost as if they run away. My head began to lower and my eyes drifted downward as I began to sink into my own thoughts. Okay, just try to keep your eyes on me as long as you... Jesus Christ! I mean, okay, I saw it. I see it. I mean, it's gone now, but I saw it. Okay, what did you see? Dr. Holloway asked, with a startled concern on his face. I don't know. They're like these skinny, long black things. Did you feel any pain or have any other odd sensations when you saw it? No, nothing at all. My blood pressure was sky high. I didn't bother telling the doctor about it, though. I wasn't in the mood for any more eye exams or brain scans. My treatment was going nowhere. My headaches weren't as bad as they had been since the accident, but they were the least of my problems. About 8 months ago, I was doing a roofing job with a couple of buddies of mine. We started this 3-man roofing company a few years back just to make some extra cash on the weekends, you know. Turns out it was more profitable than our day jobs, so we all decided to go at it full time. We all quit our jobs, went into the roofing business. We were doing great too. Even I hired us a couple of young fellas to do all the heavy lifting. I'd been a manager of a cell phone company for the past 10 years until my wife and I started having babies. Suddenly my job and her job wasn't bringing in enough money. We needed a bigger house, better neighborhood, safer vehicles, daycare costs, college funds, you know how it goes. So, I was having a few beers with some friends of mine, and we got to talking about when we were younger and how hard we used to work. Our jobs were tougher, but they kept us in shape. There was a sense of pride when you could actually see the results of what you'd been working on. So one thing led to another, and we were suddenly self-employed and taking on bigger houses and even commercial roofing projects. The day the accident happened, I couldn't have been happier. We'd just taken a lunch break. It was a cool summer day. I was drinking an ice-cold soda and finishing off a sandwich. We were putting the finishing touches on a big project, a 3-story apartment complex. It was a Thursday afternoon, and I was planning on knocking off a little early and letting the young guys finish up. My wife and I were planning a little getaway. We were going to take the kids to Six Flags for the weekend, and I already told my buddy, business partners, that I would not be coming in on Friday. I guess I got so carried away with the weekend plans, I flat out forgot I was still on the roof. I stood up, lost my balance, stumbled right over the side head first. It was like falling in slow motion. I remember trying to twist my body around so that I would land on my feet like a cat. I saw this 2nd-story gable approaching, so I put my hands out in front of me as if that would have made a difference. There was a loud, numb thump as my forehead smacked the solid clay-tiled roof. I don't remember feeling much, but I remember spinning out of control, then opening my eyes to see a hospital room ceiling. I've been unconscious for 3 days. I had all these tubes sticking out of my head, down my nose, throat, and ears. Only then did I begin to feel that pain. The constant pressure in my head, eyes, and nose was intolerable. Thankfully, the doctors kept me pretty doped up. I slept most of the time and was awake just long enough for a light meal and a few visits from my wife, kids, friends, and family. A few weeks later, they kicked me out of the hospital and told me I had to start moving around. The rest of the healing would be my own responsibility. It was for the best. To be honest, I could have laid there forever getting pampered and having my choice of painkillers. It felt good to be home, though. The doctors told me that I would have to take it easy. Although I didn't have any broken bones, or other than the ones in my head, my brain just needed time to heal and adjust. At first, I couldn't even watch complicated television programs. That was a bummer. Before the accident, my favorite guilty pleasure was sneaking into the den late at night to watch some shows about space exploration or whatever science-based programs that I thought were interesting. I had trouble even understanding SpongeBob episodes for the first few weeks. But I eventually got the hang of things, slowly resumed my nightly science programs. A few months after that, the headaches were much less frequent. And 2 more months after that, I would be able to resume my job. That's when I started noticing these weird things. The worst incident happened one morning. My wife Hannah had just left for work. I was moving slow, as usual. So she left breakfast for me in the kitchen. I was a little more sleepy than usual, but felt incredible compared to the last few months. I finally felt as if things were getting back to normal. I was just a bit sleepy, or rather felt as if I weren't quite awake. Have you ever had a bad allergy day when the pollen count is just off the charts? You wake up all stopped up and congested, and no matter how much coffee you drink, you just can't seem to wake up fully? Well, that's how it was this morning, but without all the sinus issues and without the drowsiness, if that makes any sense at all. I literally felt as if I were somehow partially asleep. At the same time, I felt great. I decided the best thing to do was get dressed for work, even though I was technically forbidden to go to work. It couldn't hurt. So I went to take a nice quick shower and shave. The water felt more than good this morning. I could feel every warm drop pounding into my flesh, washing away all the toxins that coated my skin during the night. I could almost feel each and every soap bubble sliding across my skin. When I dried off afterwards, the towel felt especially soft. I noticed it had a fresh new scent. I'd have to give my wife, Hannah, props for picking out the perfect laundry detergent. My face was so much more sensitive that morning. It was even more sensitive than it was 3 days before when I last shaved. I blamed it on a dull razor, replaced it with a new one. It still felt like each hair had a nerve of its own, and I could feel each one being sliced off. It wasn't unbearable, just rather noticeable. It was as if this particular morning was the first time I'd ever shaved. I was looking into the mirror and was pretty surprised to see there was no blood on my face. I put on my most comfortable underwear, a nice broken-in pair of jeans, a thick but loose shirt, my favorite pair of work boots. I thought a cup of coffee would set this day off to a good start. I sat on the front porch, sipping at my coffee, taking in the sights and sounds of my quiet little suburban upper-middle-class neighborhood. I couldn't get over the fact that it was so peaceful, and I fantasized that I was already retired. I was told to avoid stress for at least 2 more months, so I pushed away the thought of hospital bills before they could sink their teeth into my peaceful morning. The sounds of the neighborhood began to join in one by one, like a light symphony. The light whoosh of a sedan 1 street away, the familiar squeal of school bus brakes in the distance, chirping of semi-domesticated birds. Then I heard a light hum and a splatting sound that was growing with intensity. I heard it long before I saw the car approaching. It was a small old hatchback, slowing down, speeding up. A reddish-brown sun-dried arm appeared now and again, letting go of rolled-up newspapers that seemed to make a whoop, whoop, whoop sound as they flipped through the air, until smacking the concrete driveways of their subscribers. I tried not to stare, but so far the newspaper delivery guy was the most interesting thing that happened in the neighborhood at the time. My senses were so sharp, I could see every dent and discoloration of the beat-up old car before it even got close. I could see the roof had been repainted with a slightly darker hue of yellow. I could hear the ticking, puttering sound of a loose wire plug bouncing off the random dents and bulges and pebbles that covered the surface of the street. The creaking of old rusty leaf springs. By the time I got a real close look at it, I already knew what to expect. My mind was like a drone that could fly into the air and see everything at once before my eyes could even register it. Oddly enough, I knew the delivery man was smoking a cigar, even though the wind was blowing in the opposite direction. Suddenly, he was 2 houses down, and my assessment was dead on. He was smoking a cigar. His arm was dark, sun-dried, reddish. The wire was hanging down under the car. "What the hell are you wearing?" I mumbled to myself. There was something I didn't expect to see. The man had a strange hat on his head. At first I thought maybe he had dreadlocks on, but he looked to be an older white guy, so it didn't make sense. I continued to stare at him. My eyes were wide open, mouth gaped open. What the hell is that on his head? It looked like a big black crab attached to the back of his skull. The man never even looked at me. He was too fixated in his routine to notice me sitting there less than 50 feet away as he passed. I literally blinked my eyes several times just to make sure I wasn't peering through a flake of dust on my eye. No matter how much I blinked, shook my head, looked the other way, I could still see that black crab thing hanging on the back of his head and flailing one hand or tentacle around like a bull rider. I told myself that it had to be some sort of costume, but my newly heightened senses were telling me that I knew better than that, and that I did in fact see what I saw. What the hell was that? Oh God! I couldn't help but laugh out loud in pure astonishment, and for the first time in years I truly felt entertained. I poured the rest of my coffee out, deciding that I did not need any more stimulants for the morning. I was enjoying the way I felt, the way I was thinking at the time, way too much already. I hadn't taken painkillers for a while, so the thought of hallucinations didn't cross my mind at first. I did afterwards take into consideration that I'd recently survived a serious head injury, so I didn't let the bizarre incident bother me too much. I just had to tell Hannah what I saw, though. I didn't want to explain the whole thing in a weird text, so I just pretty much sent her, "I have to tell you something very bizarre and funny when you get home. Love you, doll." I hit send and slid the phone back in my pocket. I was still grinning from ear to ear. Hannah must have left the TV on upstairs. I could hear it as plain as day. A news reporter was regurgitating the same old story of a service station explosion that I'd heard a few days ago. I was not in the mood to hear the same sad, depressing story over again, so I walked upstairs to turn it off. I had to catch my breath at the top of the stairs. Laying around for so long just weakened me quite a bit. I thought maybe I would take a walk this morning and start to gain my strength back. I found the remote, aimed it at the TV. Then I let out a childish, "Ah!" The newscaster was doing his bit about the service station explosion. He had a dark blue suit, the light gray tie. His unusually large head was topped off with this huge, black, crab-like creature. It slowly sank away behind his head, but would occasionally wave a bulky, segmented arm around. It was hard to see, but somehow just present on the back of his head. As he spoke and moved his head around, I would catch glimpses of the thing shifting and moving right around with him. I began flipping through channels to find that not everyone, but several people had these things on the back of their skulls. My amusement ended at this time. I began to feel uneasy, tired. I turned off the TV and laid back on the bed. I blacked out. I had my usual nightmare, falling in slow motion off the roof of a 4-story building. Of course, my dream was much more exaggerated and more terrifying than the actual accident. I always woke up just before I hit the ground. I sat up gasping for air, relieved that it was only a dream. As I slowly began to catch my breath, a deep fear began to sink in, and I wondered if I would ever be able to climb onto a roof again. That fear quickly subsided when the thought of me returning to the phone store popped in my head. Fear or not, I was going to get back on a roof eventually and resume my current position at the company. Downstairs, I heard the door click and open. I glanced at my watch to find that I'd slept the entire day. Hannah was talking to someone on the phone as the kids came barreling down the hallway. I heard them asking, "Where's Daddy?" I suddenly remembered this morning's strange occurrence and was terrified that I would see those crab creatures hanging onto the heads of my wife and children. For a split second, I was terrified. My oldest boy, Jason, came running up the stairs before I had time to prepare myself. On his heels was my youngest daughter, Megan. They burst through the doorway completely wired. Thankfully, normal and crab-free. I gave a sigh of relief as they piled onto the bed with me, showering me with gentle, lightweight hugs and kisses. "Hey, son. Hey, hon." I gave a reluctant glance to Hannah in the doorway. She was smiling. It was a relief. She was also crab-free. Maybe it was a dream. Or worse, a hallucination, as Dr. Holloway would put it. "Hey, hon. How was your day?" It was the usual day, nothing exciting. Except when I was down the road at the four-way, some idiot nearly swiped us. He was just staring straight ahead like he was drunk and blew right through the stop sign. Scared me half to death. He was really flying and not paying attention to anyone. Jesus. Anyway, I was just talking to your sister and giving her an update on your current situation. Good news, by the way. We got a check from the disability insurance, so we're good. We can pay the bills. Oh, thank God. I was trying my best not to worry about it, but it was in the back of my mind the whole time. Now, you can just take your time and heal up properly. I nodded in relief. Hey, let me cook dinner. You go take a shower and get your jammies on. I'll handle these two. Are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. Go on. You deserve it. You know what? That sounds divine. I hugged my two bundles of joy and forced them into agreeing to help with dinner. Just before we all left the room, I glanced back at the TV remote, and then the TV. I decided to let it go until, or if, the strange crab incident happens again. Hopefully, it was just a blip due to my recent brain damage. Later on that night, after I put the kids to bed and peeked in to see that Hannah was fast asleep, I snuck downstairs to watch some TV and to test myself. Ryan Seacrest appeared to be normal. The History Channel seemed to be crab-free. So I watched a documentary on Nikola Tesla until my head began to hurt. I took a break to pop some over-the-counter painkillers. Then I stepped outside onto the front porch for a breath of fresh air. Oh, the wind was cool, gentle. I left the door open to allow some of that cool breeze into the house. Once again, I began to hear things so clearly. The chirping of the crickets and the rustling of bushes. 1 block away, 2 cats were having a face-off. I could even hear the bats flapping around in the dark blue star-studded skies. I could almost fine-tune my senses. I could hear the TV as a newscaster began to report all the bad stuff that she could gather for the day. I looked back into the open door, through the foyer, and onto the glowing flat screen. There was this dead-eyed reporter delivering bad news as a black crab-like creature danced around, mimicking her every move like a puppeteer in full stride. It moved back and forth as she turned her head from left to right. As her head moved down, it would shift upwards. As she looked to the left, it would lean to the right. Then it would disappear quickly behind her head. I stayed up half the night studying the TV personalities. Not all of them had the creatures on their heads, only certain ones. There was no logic to why some had them and others did not. I just couldn't make any sense of it. I decided tomorrow I would take a drive through town, conduct my own experiments. I gave Hannah a morning break, decided to take the kids to school myself. She was a bit reluctant, but I was able to convince her that I needed to get out of the house and that I'd stay as close to the house as possible, and I promised to keep my phone on me and not to get on the interstate. It was a bit more difficult than I imagined. The first crab I saw pulled right up next to me. I just barely left home, and there was one of them. I spun around nervously and gave a quick glance to the kids. They seemed to be picking up on my stress level. "What's wrong, Dad?" Jason, my oldest, asked. He and my daughter Megan were both staring at me oddly and glancing back at one another. It was my neighbor, Benny. He pulled up next to me with his new friend. He lived on the same street, but near the east end. He seemed normal, despite the obvious. Well, in my case, not so obvious. It was certainly obvious to me. We were at the four-way stop sign at the end of the street. Benny was in the left turning lane. Thank God. I didn't think I could bear the sight of that crab thing hanging off the back of his head for another block. I began to wonder if maybe the children could see them. Nothing. Everything is... Jesus Christ. That thing was waving at me. A second after that, Benny's head turned, and his arm followed suit, began to wave at me also. "I'm fine. You're fine. Even Mr. Benny's just fine." I slowly lifted my arm and waved back at the freaky black crab. And Mr. Benny. He was smiling back his usual toothy grin and appeared to be quite normal despite being ridden by a black crab, whose scaly face had obviously no expression whatsoever. It had that wave down, though. That long, segmented digit flopping back and forth stupidly, then offering a quick goodbye salute just before they sped off to the left and down the street. I turned around to my daughter in the back seat to ask her if Mr. Benny looked a little weird to her. I guess I should have straightened my face out first. It was pretty obvious she was picking up on it, and like any average kindergartner would do, she stared wide-eyed, then turned to her brother for answers. "Daddy's being weird," she whispered very loudly. "Dad," Jason began. "Daddy's fine, okay? Just got a little dizzy. That's all. But I promise you, I'm fine." I could tell by their expressions that their mother had told them to keep an eye on me and to report back anything strange. So naturally, I thought I would elaborate and smooth things over. "I just haven't been driving in a while, and I'm a little rusty,
Dad, go!"
Jason looked behind the car and pointed. There were at least 3 other cars behind me. The woman directly behind me was giving me the praise hands and mouthing, "What the hell are you doing?" Not to mention, there was a pair of black crab legs sticking out from either side of her head, giving me the same business. Suddenly, car horns began to blare out. I snapped out of it, gave a swift glance back and forth, and lurched across the street. I swear to God, if those crab things are all over the school, my kids are going to the park with Daddy for the day. The school was a good 20-minute drive on the interstate, but about 45 minutes away through town. I made a promise to Hannah that I would not take the interstate. I thought it'd be the best option to run into as few crabs as possible.
"You promised Mom you were not going to take the interstate."
"I know that, sweetie, but we're running late, so I have to."
"We're an hour early."
"Thank you, Jason. I know that. Now." Smartass. We had a few moments of silence before I just decided to go ahead and say it. Hey, did you two notice anything weird about Mr. Benny back there?
Nope.
Megan popped off, already lost in her iPad.
What do you mean?
Jason asked, just after sucking his juice pack flat. Did he look kind of weird to you?
Nope.
Megan popped off again, pretty much checked out by this point.
No.
Okay, I'll make a deal with you. If you two don't tell your mom that we took the intrastate, I'll order pizza for dinner tonight, okay?
Yes! We promise.
For the rest of the drive, I kept my distance the best I could from other vehicles. As they would pass, I would rub my head and try not to look at them. The thought of dropping my kids off at school, full of people, strangers, was becoming less and less appealing to me. Hey, Megan, do you have a test today?
I'm in kindergarten. I don't have tests.
Oh yeah, I forgot that. Jason, what about you?
Nope.
Okay then, I have an idea. How would you two like to get breakfast at Burger Barn and spend the day with Dad?
Yes!
It felt good knowing that my kids were excited to spend the day with me. Most of the excitement was for skipping school.
Welcome to Burger Barn. What can I get you today?
2 number 5s, 1 number 2 with black coffee, 2 cherry colas, please. The morning was warm and crisp. The sun peeked through the leaves and dashed off of dew-covered grass and ricocheted off the wet rooftops. The warm smell of fresh, fast food coffee, donuts, hash browns wafted in the air. It felt so good to be a functioning human being again. Just across the highway, a new office building was under construction, and heavy machinery were moving dirt around, lifting loads, dropping off supplies. I'd missed working. Felt a sigh of relief when I thought about the disability check we'd received. I had absolutely nothing to worry about. For once in my life, all was perfect.
Okay, sir, that'll be 7.
Ah!
Oh my God, sorry, sir. Did I scare you?
You're still scaring me, I muttered under my breath. It was just way too close this time. I could see it in full detail. Its body was mostly like a black coconut crab, but the legs were more like an Alaskan king crab. It had hundreds of smaller legs like a millipede all around its body. It was using those tiny legs to hang onto the back of the young girl's neck. With every move the girl made, I could hear a clicking, flapping sound. Trying not to stare, I focused as closely as I could. That thing on her neck was keeping one long, bulging eye on me. It knew I could see it. What was it thinking? What was it doing? What was it? I was so transfixed on that creature, I didn't notice the girl was holding out my breakfast.
Dad!
Oh, of course. Thank you.
$15.75, sir.
I received the bag and handed the girl my credit card, numb and stupefied. She swiped the card and swiftly handed my drinks over.
Careful, the coffee's very hot.
She said, as her crab thing shook its divided appendage at me like a stern schoolteacher. And here's your card, sir. The long black scaly claw protruded from the window with my credit card clasped in between its 2 skinny fingers. I nearly sped off, but for the sake of my children, I decided not to make a scene. Without looking at the nasty claw hanging through the drive-thru window inches from my face, I stared straight ahead and awkwardly plucked the card away from the 2 bony digits. The moment it let go, the 2 claws separated, quickly retreated into the window. With a quiet click, the girl turned and said, "Thank you for eating at Burger Barn, sir. Have a nice day." I began to drive off in shock. Jason darted from behind his seat, grabbed his sister's meal quickly, and fastened his seatbelt back. I looked back to see the crab thing still waving and watching with that disgusting, slimy red eye. Something was terribly wrong. After a few minutes of driving around, I found a nice secluded area at a nearby park to rest for a moment and eat. My children were already smacking and slurping. I just felt sick. I'd lost my appetite. The coffee smelled really good, though. I popped the lid off and blew on it for a few seconds. I raised the cup to my lips. I was just about to take a sip. My thoughts began to flutter around. What are these things? What do they want? They're obviously taking control over human beings. Where did they come from? What are they? They're taking over human beings. Where did they come from? They're wicked. These are evil taking creatures. They're controlling us. Taking over the world. Are they creatures? Do all crabs do this? What are they? You have to talk to someone. My reflexes kicked in, and I threw the coffee out of the window. I ripped open the bag of food and unraveled my biscuit. I opened it, studied it carefully. It looked normal. She looked normal. The girl at the drive-thru. She was not, though. She was taken over. They are taking over. Stop! No! I panicked and tried to get my kids, but the seatbelt was still attached. I fumbled for the release and snapped it free. "Don't eat it!" I screamed at my kids as I ripped the half-eaten biscuits from their hands.
Dad!
Megan began to sniffle. I wanted to cry too when I saw what I did, but my instincts are to protect my children first. "I'm so sorry, sweetie. Jason, son, I'm sorry. But I think those sandwiches may make you sick, okay? So don't eat those, okay? I think they're poisoned."
Dad, what's going on?
Jason began to tear up. I don't know, son. I mean, didn't you see it? That thing in the window? They just stared at me in shock, confusion.
See what, Daddy?
Jason sniffled. That thing in the window, on the girl's back? Reality check. What if I'm just sick? I set my kids down and took full responsibility for my actions. I explained to them what it was I'd been seeing, and that we would get breakfast from a place that didn't have the things, as long as they promised not to tell Mom. And the pizza for dinner was still in the deal. I drove around town and walked inside of a few restaurants until I found one that was crab-free. It was a small mom-and-pop diner with a drive-thru. We drove around, ordered new biscuits, coffee, and drinks. It was delicious. Afterwards, I took them to the park. We swung on the swings, slid down the slides, and merry-go-round on the merry-go-round. I kept my eye out, but no one at the park seemed to have crabs. My heart rate slowly returned to normal, and I began to wonder about my state of mind. If this is all in my head, then I need help. I need to talk to someone. No doctors, no psychiatrists for sure. They would lock me up, no doubt. I wouldn't blame them either. I called up my Aunt Gracie, who lived nearby. After a quick visit and a discreet back, neck, and head inspection, I dropped the kids off for a little while. I had no plan, other than to pick them up in a few hours. I decided to do an experiment. I would go to the mall, do a little shopping, sort of like hopping into the lion's den to see if they would eat me. I parked as far away from the store as I could and made a beeline to the hardware store. People knew me there, so I was hoping to run into a few old friends and see if they were taken. Even so, I would see how a familiar person would act with the crab on their neck. I managed to make it to the fifth aisle, plumbing. I took a look at a few products, but I kept one eye on the older gentleman at the end of the aisle. He was taken. He looked familiar, but I wasn't sure if I knew him well enough to test him. Danny, I thought. Danny works in the kitchen design area. We went to high school together. We did have a long-term friendship, with memories to share. I began to head towards the kitchen area, the long way around to avoid the taken soul at the end of the aisle. It was unmistakable. Danny was occupied, not with a customer. Oh Lord, here we go, I said aloud to myself, making a cross on my chest with my hands, even though I'd only been to Catholic churches a couple of times for weddings. Martin? Danny called out the minute our eyes met. His crab waved its hands with excitement. As he drew near, I began to hear that awful clicking sound. He'd suffered a mild stroke some years back, and his left leg tended to drag just a bit. He shifted side to side quickly as the crab swayed back and forth, peering at me from either side of its head with those long red peepers. He went on to say that he'd heard about my accident and asked if I'd received the flowers. I assured him that I did, and so we dashed into our conversation. We talked about my accident, his stroke, how old we were getting. He brought up high school. I thought I would give him a test. Hey man, do you remember that night we got the weed, stayed out all night smoking until the sun came up? Oh, I'll never forget that. What was that song we kept listening to? That song that Wesley's band wrote, do you remember? Make me realize. Danny began to sing as the crab danced back and forth on his neck. Yeah, I'll never forget that one. I still have it on cassette. There was an awkward silence as I slowly began to stare over his shoulder at the creature, which was now eyeballing me suspiciously. Danny looked back over his shoulder and shuffled around to see what was behind him. I could clearly see the back of the creature and how it dug its feelers into my friend's neck and clung to the back of his head. It kept one eye bent and twisted back towards me to watch me. I slowly reached out towards it, but it quickly dug into Danny's neck and spun him back around. I thought maybe it was a customer or something, Danny explained with a bit of confusion on his face. Danny, do you have time for a lunch break? So, there I was, eating corn dogs and reminiscing with my old friend Danny and his crab. After a while, I pretended not to notice the thing to see what it would do. Maybe, if it didn't know I was aware of it, it would, I don't know, try something. Maybe it would make Danny say something out of the ordinary. After 10 minutes or so, everything just seemed normal. Only it wasn't. Either I was insane, or there was a crab hanging from my friend's neck. Danny, I began, I know you and I haven't been the closest friends, but we've known each other a long time, right? Yeah, of course. I have to tell you something. Boy, did I. By the time I finished, he and the crab were staring at me intently and with great concern. My blood pressure was jacked. I didn't know if he was going to attack me, scream and run away, or if that thing on his neck was going to call others to come get me. But none of that happened. So, he began after a long, slow sip from his Dr. Pepper. Is it on my head right now? Yes. It looks like a crab, like a black coconut crab with long legs like an Alaskan king crab. I added, feeling very awkward as the thing just stared at me. It's staring at me right now. And you see that lady over there? She has one too. And that guy right there, over there, he has one. But you see that guy right there? He doesn't. Danny looked around and didn't seem to notice anything. Oddly enough, neither did his crab. At least it didn't seem to act as if it could see anything weird. Look, I know this sounds freaking weird. It is. I'm just trying to find out whether or not I'm insane. I mean, even if I am not dangerous. I promise you that, Danny. It's just, if I'm right, what if I am? If I'm right, then these things are taking over people. Can you do me a favor, Danny? Shoot, Danny said reluctantly. Can you just reach behind your head and maybe, I don't know, feel around and tell me if you feel anything weird? I know it sounds crazy, but just please, just give it a try for me, please. Okay, Martin, I'll give it a try. My heart quickened as he looked around slowly to make sure no one was watching. He began to reach behind his head. The crab's eyes began to focus on his hands, and ever so gently, Danny's hands were running the length of the crab's left claw. The slimy, bloodshot eye blinked and ducked away as his hand poked at it. There was a clicking that began to grow louder and louder, and suddenly, "Nope, not feeling anything, bud," he added, and finished off his Dr. Pepper. You didn't feel anything? At all? I mean, you were touching it. Sorry, man, but no, I didn't. He stopped dead still, began to stare down at his hands. They were shaking. The clicking sound was growing louder. The crab began to shake uncontrollably, scampering about Danny's head as if it were on ice. It appeared to be slipping. Danny stood up quickly and ran over to a pillar with a mirror on it. He began to scream uncontrollably, reaching back towards his neck. Get it off! Get it off me! Get help! Get it off of me! Get it off of me! Martin! Get it off of me! From behind, I could see the tentacles flailing around wildly as the crab began to lose control and slip. Danny was grasping each of the long, scaly black arms and twisting them violently. His body began to convulse and spasm as a gurgling scream escaped his chest. With a high-pitched shriek and a primal scream, Danny peeled the creature from his neck as blood and scales and slimy black body parts flew all over the place. Someone call 911! A young man screamed. I turned to look at him. He was taken. We need help over here! Another man yelled at a security officer. He was taken. A crowd began to gather around, offering assistance and just staring. They were all taken. I quickly backed away from the crowd of people and began to run. Everyone I looked at had those things on them. They were everywhere. I jumped in the car and took off. Poor Danny, I thought, but I was too overcome by fear to feel anything else. I just needed to get to my children. Back at Aunt Gracie's house, I left the car running and darted through the front door. My adrenaline was gushing through my veins. Aunt Gracie! Jason! Maggie! The house was quiet. I could hear the kids in the backyard playing. I wandered through the kitchen and peered out of the window. My worst fear was playing out right before my eyes. Aunt Gracie, taken. My children, both taken. I just stared at them, began to cry. No. Oh, God. No. I would not let those things take my children, though. Right next to my hand was a sturdy, thick butcher knife. It was all a violent blur. I attacked Aunt Gracie first. I grabbed that disgusting creature by its arms and snapped them both off. It squealed and screamed as I stabbed and sliced it to pieces. Aunt Gracie screamed. The children screamed. They had to go. I could not let those things take my children, even if it meant killing them. I dropped the bloody and black mucus-stained knife into the sink and vomited. I could already hear sirens on the way. They would show up all covered in those sickly crab things. There was no way out. I would be taken. I reached back into the sink and grabbed the butcher knife. I placed a sharp blade to my throat, and I froze. In my distorted reflection, beaming off the shiny kitchen faucet, I saw a sickly set of black claws protruding from behind my head. I ran to the bathroom mirror. I could see it. The creature was on me. They had me. In a fit of rage, panic, and fear, I reached back and grabbed its claws, pulling and tearing at the scaly, segmented appendages. The pain was excruciating. I could feel the sharp, jagged tentacles tearing away from my neck and ripping my nerves to shreds. It felt like my neck and spine were directly connected to a light socket. Searing pain, electrical pulses radiated through my body. I grabbed, punched, twisted, snapped, clawed at the beast until finally it released me. I don't know how long I was out, but I could hear voices outside. People were screaming, crying. The only thing I could make out was, "He killed them all." He killed them all. What have I done? As I lay motionless, staring at that thing across from me, hunkered down in the corner, the truth finally began to sink in. It was me the whole time. I did this to myself and my kids. It was us. The soft, limp body was leaking red blood onto the floor. I could see the back of its neck, where I used to live. It was nothing without me. I was nothing without it. All of my memories, the love I had and gave, the laughter, tears, the pain and pleasure was all still with me. I tried to move, but my hands had been torn away from their sockets. As I began to fade away and dissolve into a hot, clear vapor, I felt a deep sorrow and regret for my wife. Hannah, she'll never understand this.